Hello, Matthew Bell with
Alzheimer'sProof.com. Today I wanted to start a series regarding money considerations as they relate to Alzheimer's and Alzheimer's care. I have wanted to get into this series for some time now, but some of the things that are going on in the economy and in the society broadly have kind of put a sharp focus on financial matters for me and for many other people. So I thought this was as good a time as any to start to unpack this series a little bit. Today I'm going to be giving a roadmap as to what to expect from the series. I'm going to kind of give a lay of the land, and in my perspective, the way I'm thinking of this is subdivided into three main categories. So the first is going to be before, the second during, and the third after. And what I mean by that is, considered from the standpoint primarily of the Alzheimer's sufferer, certain financial plans are going to have to be put in place before the person suffers a diminishment of cognitive capacity that impacts their ability to make decisions and to handle finances and so on. So that before stage is really bound up with the keyword planning. Then there's going to be a during stage, and in this stage what I envision is conversations about how money is actually spent, how the checks are written, how charges are authorized, where they're going, and so on. Finally, the after stage is going to be primarily concerned with those people who are left behind. So if there's any money left, we might be talking about beneficiaries, heirs, survivors, and the conversation is going to be different depending on whether or not they were counting on the money from the person who has passed of Alzheimer's disease or from some other cause or not. I should say at this point, a number of topics that I'm going to touch on here I do get into in other places, so I have a dedicated video on how somebody dies from Alzheimer's disease. I'll put that up here. I'll put the link in the description. And as we move through, I will remind you that this is merely a roadmap. I will get in more detail to these various categories in subsequent videos. So speaking for just a minute about the planning stage, what I have in mind is essentially that period of time where a person is ahead of the decline that's going to be experienced in Alzheimer's disease and the plans are beginning to be put into place. A lot of this is going to be information gathering. That's going to be a primary feature of this planning stage. You're going to want to know what types of accounts there are. Do you have assets in the banking sector? Do you have them in insurance? Do you have them in brokerage accounts, in retirement accounts? Where are the assets? How are they allocated? What accessibility is there for these various assets? Are there penalties? What's the tax obligations and those kinds of things? Some of the documents you're going to want to gather for that stage are going to be things like the deeds, statements for the various accounts that are held. And again, I will get into more detail in the video that I will dedicate to the planning stage. Another facet of planning is going to be the attempt to estimate the impact to the family and to the individual. Obviously, part of this estimated impact is going to be physical or medical, but what we have in mind here is the impact to the family's finances. This initial planning stage is probably best thought of as subdivided into at least two further categories. The first subcategory in the planning stage is going to be the planning that's done well in advance. So call that the way before planning. In this stage, you're going to have rough estimates regarding impact in the future, but they're not going to be very fine-grained or detailed. So for instance, for me, if, knock on wood, I do not have cognitive impairment prior to the age that my dad has, hopefully I never get it, but my dad was 75, so I am about 30 years out from having to deal with the same cognitive impairment as my dad, if I experienced the beginnings of it at the same time he did. So when you think of it that way, 30 years out, it is quite difficult to estimate the cost of care, the types of expenses that I might incur, what care might be available, and all of the factors that go into doing a detailed financial calculation. I'm going to have to depend very heavily on guesses regarding cost of living increases, inflation, and other things like this. The well before stage, though, has certain advantages. So even if that's a disadvantage, not have specific detailed data, there are certain advantages to the well before stage. Now is the time when I am more likely to be approvable for things like long-term care insurance if I desire to go that route, where I can put Medicaid trusts in place and not have to worry about running afoul of the look-back period and other things like this. The second subdivision in the planning stage is going to be the immediately before stage. In this stage, we are looking at having more severe Alzheimer's coming on imminently. So the person in this immediately before stage is really on the cusp of losing mental faculties or losing abilities to the point where he or she will no longer be able to meaningfully participate in the planning process anymore. So here it's going to be really important to make sure that all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed with respect to appointing successor trustees, people who are going to have power of attorney, and other things like this. This stage might be where a person solidifies plans to apply for community or government aid, where they communicate wishes to loved ones and other people who are going to be legally and financially responsible for their affairs, where they're able to estimate costs more precisely because now the time horizon to where they're going to have to experience many of these things is compressed and shortened. And finally, where they are going to factor in finalities with respect to estate and legacy planning. Hopefully those things, the groundwork has been laid previously, and now they're just going to be able to tie these off with a bow. Now, it's worth interjecting that the question might arise as to what relationship there is between my before, during, and after stages in financial matters and the 3 stages of Alzheimer's disease as they are commonly understood to be early stage, middle stage, and late stage. There are other views for stages. There's a 7-stage view, 5 stages. I get into that discussion in another video. But the way that I see it, there isn't a forced march, there isn't a neat correlation between the 3 stages of Alzheimer's and the 3 stages as I'm envisioning them here. And the reason you can see by backing into that a little bit, starting from the final stage. So my final stage was after Alzheimer's, which means that that stage is primarily focused with people left behind. The person with Alzheimer's by that stage in financial matters has already passed. So that is sharply contrasted with the final stage of Alzheimer's disease, early, middle, and late stage. In late stage Alzheimer's disease, the Alzheimer's sufferer is still alive, but has a very low level of cognitive function. Right there's a big disparity between late stage Alzheimer's and my after stage in which the Alzheimer's patient has already passed. Additionally, the during stage, in terms of financial matters, will really encompass middle and late stage in the traditional enumeration of 3 stages of Alzheimer's disease. And the reason for that is by middle stage, the person with Alzheimer's is starting to be at least unreliable in terms of their ability to maintain focus, make decisions, and other things that are relevant to the conversation we're having here. Now, my before stage, it is true, since I have a way before and an immediately before subdivision, that stage could well map onto things like mild cognitive impairment or even early stage Alzheimer's, where the person in question, even though they're suffering from some diminishment of memory, possibly some mobility issues or other things that are starting to afflict them, nevertheless, they might still be able to participate to some meaningful extent in some of the planning processes. They might, however, be foreclosed on from the standpoint of trying to get long-term care and put certain coverages in place, or to put in place things like a Medicaid trust, because they might be more likely to run afoul of the look-back period. But once again, we'll get into greater detail as we move forward. The during stage, the way I envision it, is the actual spending stage. So in this case, it's going to be where is the money going to go, or where do you anticipate it going? This stage is going to be concerned with things like home modifications, things like the medications and the therapies that you're going to have to pay for the Alzheimer's afflicted individual. You might pay nurses to come into the home or other people to help you, whether they're skilled or unskilled. And finally, you might pay to have the person actually in some kind of a care environment, like a nursing home or other facility. And I have an entire video where I deal with the different care environments, from adult daycare, assisted living, respite care. I also talk about hospice for end-of-life scenarios and other things besides. Finally, there is the after stage. And like I have said a couple of times, this is focused on the people left behind, not so much the person with the Alzheimer's disease who we're envisioning by this point has passed. Now, if there are assets left, it might be a conversation about how to split those among beneficiaries or heirs. But if there is nothing left from the standpoint of money, then it's going to be a conversation about how the survivors can pick up the pieces and move forward in any meaningful way. My mom is in this situation. When my dad passed, she was left in a very bad situation financially. She had depended on my dad in part for income. His retirement savings was an asset that was supposed to cover the both of them in retirement. That was depleted in the Medicaid spend down. And so for her, and I expect for other people, this is going to be a pick up the pieces kind of a conversation. And I hope to be able to say something of use in that video when it comes time for that. So once again, the 3 phases, as I envision them for this financial conversation, are going to be before the Alzheimer's really gets bad, the planning that you do; during the time when the Alzheimer's is starting to get bad, where do you put the money; and the third is going to be the conversation as to how do you pick up the pieces after the person with Alzheimer's disease has passed. Finally, I should say as a caveat or a disclaimer, I am not a financial planner. I am not a tax preparer. I don't do estate or legacy planning. This conversation is merely for general informational or entertainment purposes. Please don't construe any of what I'm saying as specific advice. If you need specific advice, and many people will, then you're going to need to consult licensed and qualified professionals in your area, people that you can disclose the terms, the details of your financial situation, and they can help you in your individual cases to actually make the best decisions possible for you and your family. If you found something of use in this preliminary conversation, I ask that you like the video, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the future installments, click the notification bell, and you'll be alerted to content as it becomes available. If you think somebody might find this conversation of use, I ask that you share it with them, and please don't forget to check back in because I will be going into detail in each of the 3 categories that I have just mentioned. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I look forward to seeing you again in the future for one of those videos. Thank you so much.